Well, it's been more than a year later, but it finally feels as if people are finally willing to admit that Fire Emblem Engage is a great game. It isn't an okay game, it isn't mid, it isn't like mediocre, it's not bad, it's not the worst thing ever made. It is legitimately good. And it does feel like there's a very dedicated segment of the Fire Emblem fan base who are in denial about that fact. It's very similar to like how Star Fox Zero is treated actually, but by and large, I think the reputation Fire and Engage has uh, able to maintain over the past year has been overwhelmingly positive. Those of us who actually played the game really, really enjoy it. It does feel like right now the people who are speaking out against it are people like Arlo, who are just like, what about the story though? Like, what about the characters? What about the waifus? Like they don't actually care about the game itself, right? They don't think about in any terms about like what the game's positives. All they can focus on is the negatives, right? Like Princess Peach Showtime is too easy, right? Like they're doing the same thing now with like Endless Ocean, right? Like, oh, Endless Ocean 3 has 32 players online. I guess every single one of the people who are going to play it are going to be able to play it when it comes out, like play it together when it comes out. Like, I saw Andre Seeger say that, and it's so laughably ridiculous. Like, come on. Like, Endless Ocean is fairly popular. Like, it's going to do reasonably well. Like, people are excited for it. I'm excited for it. Like, come on. But Fire Emblem Engage is interesting because when that game came out, people really, really tried to present it as if it was like some unmitigated disaster, that it was going to kill the brand, that it was some huge blow against Nintendo, against Intelligent Systems, against like, like the end of Fire Emblem's like golden era of Renaissance period, right? Like this was supposed to kill the franchise, right? And of course, like people don't understand the perspective here. Fire Emblem Three Houses, like Engage sold way less than Three Houses, right? Like the belief was that this was because Engage was such a disappointment, but the reality is that like Three Houses was like the best selling title in the franchise ever, right? It had like smash hype, it had like a really well received plot and like mechanics that appealed to an older demographic. Three Houses was an experiment that paid off really, really, really well. Right, a lot of new fans came on board with Three Houses, and well deserved. Right, Three Houses is a masterpiece, but Engage lost a lot of those people because of the radical shift in direction, because Three Houses is such a long game in general, and because of the tone change. Right, like there are genuine like off-putting things about Engage coming off of Three Houses. I talked about it. Like I was like not looking forward to Engage at all when it was first announced because I couldn't believe they came up with like such a terrible looking art style. But seeing it in motion, like you begin to grow an appreciation for it. You get to understand how good it is, and you get to like actually experience the game's positive attributes. Right, there are plenty of things to enjoy about Fire Emblem Engage, and that becomes apparent after you play it. And I do think this is the problem that Pretendos are having when it comes to dismissing games like Fire Emblem Engage, like Cereza and the Lost Demon, like Pikmin 4, like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, like Tears of the Kingdom, even. Like they are trying to dismiss games that they have not played. All they can do is sit there and try to tell you that, like, oh, nobody wants to play Endless Ocean 3. Nobody wants to play Unicorn Overlord. Nobody wants to play Princess Peach Showtime or another code R. Even though those are all really dedicated, even though all those games have like really dedicated followings that really like them for what they are. Like this is the thing with this year that I've noticed. There aren't like big titles coming out, but all the ones that are like smaller games that are doing very well with different groups of people, right? Switch is not having a bad year at all. And yet you're seeing people like try and like scream doom and gloom about the console. Like the fact that there's so much variety, that there's so many niche games, if anything, it goes to show you just how successful the Switch actually is, right? That stuff like Little Kitty in the Big City or whatever can get made, get released, and get people interested in it. That Endless Ocean 3 can get made. And find success. That all these ports and like everything else that's coming out this year, like Fantasy Life is coming back, right? Like to me, the the dismissal of Fire Emblem Engage much like the dismissal of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, was completely unwarranted. Right? Like it's really weird trying to see people like try and make up narratives about these games out of whole cloth. Like the big one I see about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in particular is that it was censored after 2, that completely disregarding like the difference in tone of 3 and like the setting and like what's going on with the plot and the characters and the nature of the setting. Like anyone who plays it understands why the characters aren't sexualized in 3. Like it makes perfect sense in context. But there's this massive conspiracy that's been going around since the game came out that like the game has been censored because Nintendo is the most censorship happy company ever. Like again, there was like that very big push to push that narrative, and Engage had a very similar push, right? Like I don't know what people are trying to say about Engage because I haven't been paying that much attention to it because I know it's crap, right? But like, the idea that Engage was a failure and that it didn't have any fans at all is just objectively wrong, right? And you're seeing this now with Tears of the Kingdom as well, right? Like people are trying to tell you that, oh, nobody's talking about Tears of the Kingdom a year later, but we totally are. Like I've been thinking about like returning to the game soon. So like for me personally, um, why exactly, why exactly am I expected to take like the social media empire's word on like what is and isn't successful on Nintendo consoles? Because Fire Emblem Engage was successful. Pokemon Legends Arceus was successful. Princess Peach Showtime was successful. It outsold Rise of the Ronin and that Dragon's Dogma 2, right? Like it outsold the two big AAA games that came out around that same time period, and yet you're still seeing people try to write it off as like a minor release. It's becoming a trend here where every Nintendo game that comes out gets like readily dismissed, really for no reason, by people who like had no intention of playing the games to begin with. Right? It happens over and over and over and over again with all these different games and all these different genres and from all these different developers. Like none of them are relevant because it's a Nintendo Switch game, and Nintendo Switch is for little babies. That is the mindset that these people are in. That's the narrative. That's the agenda. And I really don't think it's working, honestly. Like the fact that Fire Emblem Engage was like hated as much as it was, that people push so many narratives about it, and then seeing how popular it is a year later, seeing people talk about it positively, like defend it, and like seeing how much it sold and like how fondly people remember, like you really begin to understand just how good the game actually is. And there is absolutely nothing that the gaming community can do to downplay that.